Hey Nicole, sorry for being so early. I just wanted to make sure Zoom was working for me.
Sorry, I was trying to find the mute button. It's no problem. No problem. I usually jump on early just to make sure I've got my grip on everything that's going on.
I always feel like whenever I have a Zoom call instead of like a Teams call, that Zoom just needs updates or my audio doesn't work or something always goes awry with Zoom. It makes me paranoid.
Yeah, same. Same. And it feels like it's always different every time I log in.
Yes,
It's
so
silly, but
much.
yeah.
Hi, everyone. It's a little after 1:30, so we will get started. Thanks everyone for coming to the January data meeting. And Erin is at a conference this week, Callista's out of town, so I'm just introducing the meeting, and then each person, when it shows up with your name on the slide, feel free to start talking. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, please mute your microphone, raise your hand if you have a question. Feel free to put questions in the chat as well. All right, so here is the agenda. We also sent it out in the email, and we are going to start off with Nicole.
Hi, everyone. I am just going over the calendar year for the LEA data meetings. This year, meetings are usually held on the fourth Thursday of the month. Exceptions are highlighted in yellow. So today is our regular meeting. February, we will not have a meeting due to the legislative session. March 27th, we'll have a regular meeting. April 23rd, please mark that in your calendars. We will be having our spring data conference again at NEBO, where we had it last year. May 22nd, we have a regular meeting with the year-end upload, preview and training. June 26th, our regular meeting again. July, we will not have a meeting. And then August 7th, our regular meeting. September 18th will also be regular meeting with the October upload, preview and training. October 23rd will be a regular meeting, November 20th, and then December we will not have a meeting. And that is it. If you guys have questions, please reach out to me. Please mark those on your calendars as well.
I think Kimberly Loveland is going to start us off with the CMP Summer EBT updates.
Good afternoon, everybody. Kim Loveland, Director of Child Nutrition Programs here at the Utah State Board of Education. I also have Tammy Walker, who you just heard. She's our Senior Business Analyst for Child Nutrition Programs. And on the line as well is Natalie Barfus, who is with the Department of Workforce Services. So as we go through this presentation to give you an update on the Summer EBT program, please post your questions in the chat. We'll try to get them today. If not, we will take those notes and get back to you on your questions. So again, the Summer EBT program, it's a new program that's being stood up this year in Utah. There's other states in the nation that started last summer, but the state of Utah was able to secure funding for 2025. So we are moving forward. The USBE board also approved CMP to work with the Department of Workforce Services to stand up this program starting this summer. So there's a few learning objectives for our time here today, and we want to go over the eligibility criteria. Second, the data collection that will be happening over the spring and summer, and then the different pathways that students can become eligible for summer EBT. So we'll cover those three things in a little more detail over the next few minutes. Just to give you an overview of Summer EBT, it stands for Summer Electronic Benefits Transfer Program. It's also known as SunBucks. So in child nutrition, we have two summer meal programs. A lot of the districts and some of the charter schools provide the seamless summer option during the summer months when school is out of session. Some of our nonprofit organizations like the Utah Food Bank, Boys and Girls Club, they operate the SFSP, which is the Summer Food Service Program during the summer months in areas where districts and charter schools don't have reach. So Summer EBT is considered a third arm to provide nutrition assistance to low-income families when school's not in session. And students that are eligible based off free, reduced, or income levels will receive a electronic benefit card, and they will receive $120 for the summer for each child. And households can use those cards at eligible grocery stores and farmers markets to purchase food when kids don't have access to school meals. So that's just a quick rundown of what the program is. In our state, the Department of Workforce Services will be the lead agency, and we will be a supporting agency with each one of our LEAs that participate in our programs to make this happen. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So to qualify for summer EBT, the federal regulations outline what that needs to look like. So for students to get benefits for this coming summer, they need to be enrolled in a school that participates in the National School Lunch Program anytime between July 1st of 2024 and when school ends in May. And so that's the first criteria. The second criteria that they have to meet is during that same time frame, those enrolled students must have also been approved for free reduced price meals. And we have what's called a summer operation period that extends into August for any newly eligible students. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say Tommy is enrolled in a NSLP school in August of 2024, and his family applies for free reduced price meals in September, and he's approved. So Tommy would be eligible for the summer EBT benefit in summer of 2025. We'll say we have another student, Jane. She's also enrolled in a National School Lunch Program school. Let's say she enrolls in April of 2025. So she meets that first criteria. But her family doesn't apply for free reduced price benefits, or she's not directly certified for those benefits. And then when the summer comes around, her family submits an application to the school food service in July of 2025, and they are approved. So because Jane was enrolled in a school in school year 25, but determined eligible over this coming summer, we will also include her as an eligible student for summer EBT. So it gets a little bit tricky, and we've had to kind of map it out a little bit, but again, they have to meet both of those criteria. And if you have specific questions on that, you can reach out to us. And we can talk through that in a little more detail with some different scenarios. So with summer EBT, states are required to have a database in place by 2025 to collect information. And so as part of that, we've set up a data sharing agreement between USBE and the Department of Workforce Services. So that is in place. Also, this last week, we received a letter from the U.S. Department of Education, and there's a link to the PowerPoint in the PowerPoint slide that you'll have access to after this meeting today. But it does clarify that those data collections that we're asking for does not violate FERPA, and that we can share PII with our Department of Workforce Services. So that just reinforces what we have in our data sharing agreement. Also, as part of the USBE board approval for us to participate, they were very clear on how they wanted us to be transparent with families about their data being shared. So for 2025 school year, we added an opt-out statement on the free reduced price application, and that was made available to the food service staff and directors to include that on their applications. So again, if a household checks that opt-out box on the free reduced price application, then we will not be sharing their information with the Department of Workforce Services. And next slide, please. Here's the timeline that we're looking at for data collection. We will start, right now, it looks like mid-April. We'll start collecting that in Utrex. And then we know that systems are going to be going down over the summer. And we also know that students will become newly eligible over those summer months. So we will be doing some data collection to get those newly eligible students. Our goal is to try to get as many students in those first data collections in April and May as we can. We're estimating about 200,000 kids eligible for this program. And we will continue to work on eligibility and data collections through the end of August. And if there's any changes to our summer operation period for summer EBT, we will let you guys know.
Hey, Kim, there's
Yes.
a question in the chat that says, what about direct cert students? How do they opt out if they wish to? And then someone responded saying direct cert students opt out with DWS since we determine their eligibility for the program. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so Natalie, thank you for responding to that question. We'll get into this a little more detail when we talk about the different pathways that students will be given benefits, but DWS will handle the directly certified students that they have in their caseloads as one of the first ways that we will issue benefits. So that will take care of that. I see another question in the chat. Yes, how will data collection be done when Utrex collections are paused in the month of July? So we've had lots of conversations about that as well, knowing that that was going to be happening. And so we will, again, our goal is to get most of the kids in April and May, and then that there will only be a few students that become newly eligible over the summer months. So we will be looking at possibly like an Excel data file that will be sent to us on that, but we do need to make some exceptions during that time period. And then, like I said on the timeline before, we will likely be collecting through August. So when the systems get back up, we should be able to collect information that way as well. And Tammy or Natalie can chime in on that as well if they would like. All right, Tammy's going to go ahead and go over the data elements that we will be collecting in Utrex.
Thank you, Kim. As you said, we have new data elements available in Utrex. I believe that they are live now, and Cliff can correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of back to the timeline that Kim showed, and I think it was the previous slide. We were planning on starting to collect those in April. However, our time frame has kind of, it sounds like it's going to be moving up, and we're going to be starting to look at preliminary data probably in March. So we would ask as soon as you are able to start providing those fields. I see that Cliff says they're not live yet, and I know that he will be presenting later in this meeting, so maybe he can discuss when those will go live. But the new elements that we are setting up in Utrex, there will be a new table and or a new record, and it is the S5 record, and that's for summer EBT beginning this year, school year 2025. And the 3 data fields we will be collecting, there's a free and reduced price eligibility date for the student, and that has to be reflective of the current school year. So for school year 25, You would exclude students that were eligible only during the 30-day carryover period at the beginning of the year, and then later were dropped to full pay status. Those students are not eligible for summer EBT because they have to have a free reduced eligibility determination during the school year. So that means that you would include current year eligible students that became eligible because of an approved household application or because of direct certification. And again, that date has to be, the determination date has to fall within the current school year. Excuse me. The second field we will be requesting is free and reduced price eligibility source. Again, that's for the current school year. And the 4 options, there's going to be SNAP Direct Cert, SNAP DC, other Direct Cert, which would include TANF, foster, Medicaid free, Medicaid reduced, homeless, migrant, runaway, if you have a liaison that can give you that information. I don't think I've forgotten everything. I think that's it. Kim can correct me if I'm wrong. There's also a categorical application and income application, and your food service directors have all of that information for students that have been determined eligible for free or reduced price meal eligibility. The third new field is going to be the DWS summer EBT opt-out, and that's Kim mentioned that just a couple minutes ago. This was requested by the Utah State Board of Education so that parents can choose to opt out of us sharing data with DWS for the purpose of summer EBT. And there's an indicator on the free and reduced price meal application that they will have to mark. And I'll show you that indicator in a minute. Households that opt out of data sharing must submit a summer EBT application directly with DWS if they want summer EBT benefits. In reality, DWS is going to be collecting the same data that we would be sharing through Utrex, that we collect from Utrex. But I understand that sometimes parents don't want data shared between government agencies, and so if they choose the opt-out, data sharing opt-out, they do have to go directly to the DWS website to submit a summer EBT application. And there's a link there that application will be posted on the DWS webpage. It isn't live yet, but it will be soon. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so currently these are the validations that we are discussing for the S5 record. Neither of them are fatals, but they are warnings. So if a student on the economic disadvantage field, if they are marked as F for free or R for reduced, and if there is no free and reduced price eligibility source, or if there is no free and reduced price eligibility date, then there's a warning. If the student is considered F or R under economic disadvantage, then the data collector will warn you if you don't also go to the S5 record and enter a free and reduced price eligibility source and free and reduced price eligibility date, because those are the students that will be eligible for the summer EBT benefits. They're marked as F or R on the economic disadvantage field, and also if they are enrolled in a school participating in the National School Lunch Program at some point during the school year. Another warning will come if, again, the economic disadvantage field is marked as F or R, and any of the information is missing, any of these 3 items: mailing address, line 1, parent guardian first name, and parent guardian last name. I know that those data fields are not required on the data collector, but for the purpose of summer EBT, we do need those fields. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is a list of data we will be pulling from the S1 record. So yes, we are we are requesting 3 new fields on the S5 record, but we also will have to collect these fields from the S1 record in order to be able to provide the summer EBT benefit to a student. So there's a list here: LEA name, number, school name, number, SSID, LEA student number, student last name, middle name, first name, date of birth, their enrollment date. We need to be able to determine they were enrolled in the current school year and in which school, their withdrawal date, guardian first name, last name, if available, guardian phone number and email address, and then the mailing address. So those are all items from the S1 record that we will be pulling as well in our report. Next slide, please. Okay, so this shows you what the summer EBT opt-out looks like on the free and reduced price meal application. So households can use this opt-out to tell us that they do not want us to share data with DWS for summer EBT purposes, so they can check the box if that's what they want to declare. And again, like I said, if they do opt out, they have to submit a separate application to DWS. So this checkbox is located on the school year 2025 Utah free reduced price application on page 2. And there's the box, and it says, by checking the box, the household is indicating as stated, no, I do not want information from my free and reduced price school meals application shared with the Department of Workforce Services and Utah State Board of Education to issue summer EBT benefits. I understand if my information is not shared, I will need to apply with the Department of Workforce Services to determine summer EBT eligibility. So that field, the new field on the S5 record, we're asking you to indicate, if you enter a Y, that means yes, the household opted out. So that means they marked the checkbox. If you enter no, that means the household did not opt out of data sharing. And if you don't enter anything at all, that means that there's no information, which is that the parent did not submit a free or reduced price household application. And so you wouldn't have any information on that checkbox. Okay, I see some questions here in the chat. Cliff said that these fields are not live yet. Development of the new CMP fields is in progress, but will not be expected to be available for entry for 1 to 2 months. Okay, so we will have to keep you posted. SIS systems still need to build out this new object in the fields. That is likely going to take longer. Okay, and we understand that. So that might affect the timeline of the data gathering that we are doing, at least, especially for this first year. Natalie mentioned a parent opting out is also only valid for the current school year, meaning that a parent must opt out each year they do not want to participate. Thank you. That's a good point. Okay, Lynn says that Power School has their CMP fields finished, which is interesting. I didn't know that they had the specifications there. Okay, and as Cliff said, all of the S5 fields are needed in order for a student to be able to receive SEBT benefits, even though they are only giving warnings. Yes, we could only make those fields as warnings in the Utrecht's data collector because we couldn't affect if a student was accepted for, you know, if their entire record was accepted. So we have to have warnings, but it can't be fatal, just for our purposes. Okay, so Stephen is asking, is this S5 record going to be in place for the current year's submission? And if so, does that mean that there won't be a CSV collection this year for summer EBT? So I think we're going to have to get back with you about when the S5 record is available. Like I said, we will be submitting data to DWS probably around the middle of May. And so if this collector isn't ready by this school year, we will have to probably go to collecting Excel spreadsheets as we have done previously for the pandemic EBT. But that is, we'll have to see how far along these new data fields are and how long it takes for them to go live. Okay, I'm not sure what that comment that Lynn made, I'm not sure what that is referring to. Okay, I think I'm finished with my presentation. Kim, if you want to go to the next slide.
All right. Just seeing the comments in the chat too. Again, there were quite a few states that did summer EBT last year, and so there's probably already been some conversations with software systems about the data that's needed from the education side to issue those benefits. So again, talk to your SIS systems to have some conversations internally. Include your food service directors on those conversations. It's helpful for us to kind of know, based off the information we're giving you today, what that's going to look like for your LEA as far as being able to submit that information. Also knowing that that's dependent on when it's set up in your trucks. All right, so a couple of things that were very distinct and in the new regulations for this program is that students enrolled in a community eligibility provision or a non-base year provision to school are not automatically eligible for benefits under summer EBT. And that's because when those schools opt into those options for their meal service, they no longer collect free and reduced price applications or conduct direct certification. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't have that information for some of those students because some of them, their siblings might be attending, non-CP or non-provision two schools. But in this case, they will be directed to go to the online portal that will be hosted by Department of Workforce Services to apply for summer EBT. So we do want to make that distinction, and we will be providing a list of those CP and provision schools to DWS each year, but there is a link to a list of those schools on the Data and Statistics website for your reference. Slide, please. All right, so here's the different pathways that students can be issued benefits. So again, the focus and a lot of the energy is going to be spent on this streamlined certification that you can see on the left-hand side of the slide. DWS already has information on students that receive SNAP and Medicaid and some of those other programs. So they will be taking care of that side of the house for us. They will be issuing benefits to children ages 6 through 18 because those are compulsory age students. So that will be the priority as we get going on this. The second priority in conjunction with this will be your assistance in helping us get free and reduced price eligibility and enrollment information to USBE so that we can then send that on to DWS. And again, with the summer EBT program, those will be physical cards that individuals use at the store. So we do need to have accurate mailing addresses, parent information, if cards get returned or follow-up is needed to get current information. That's why that's important for us to have that information. And we, let us know what you guys need as far as like communication pieces. We'll talk to the food service side as well to kind of see what they need, because we don't know where you're going to be pulling this information from. And we do want to have some kind of communication going out to families to make sure that their information is current in your systems, and they'll need instructions on how to do that. Again, just trying to be proactive so we can get a bulk of these kids eligible and issued benefits at the first part of the summer. And then the third pathway will be that household application with DWS. So they will be standing up an online application, and anyone can go there, apply for those benefits. And then as part of our data sharing agreement, there'll be a specific DWS staff that can check enrollment records from UTREX to make sure that they were enrolled in a NSLP school. So again, those are the three pathways that we'll be looking at. But with the intention of the program, they want to have us focus on the streamlined certification, not have families do the application process because they've already been determined eligible if they are enrolled and receiving certain public assistance programs or eligible for free reduced price meals. All right. I think all of the questions in the chat have been answered, but we'll hang on for just a few more minutes. If there's other questions you guys want to post in the chat, and we'll monitor that for the next few minutes. So that's all we have from CEP. Thank you, and we will be back with more information and get that information out to you as soon as we can. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Go ahead to the next slide. All right, so the first thing I have is a little bit of feedback of some of the things that at USBE that we've been doing that we wanted to share and make sure you're aware of and get your feedback on. Go to the next slide. So we met with SISs. We got a bunch of representatives from each of the SISs to come together and sort of discuss what opportunities we have, get feedback, and to make plans as far as to how we can have a stronger relationship and just get things done better together. Some of the key takeaways that we have were that the vendors really wanted to be able to have meetings with us instead of just hearing things secondhand through their LEAs, which has commonly been the way that they get that information. And sometimes it's not as clear or detailed as they would need to have. So it takes longer in that process. So they've asked for us to look towards setting up some meetings directly with USB to bring technical changes to them to where we can discuss the implementation. And specifically, they would like for us to try to bring it to them to where they hear it from us first about things like, say, this new CMP set of data that says, you know, we need you to build out this new object type. We need to have you build out all of these fields, find out, you know, if they've got time frames, things like that, that there's a lot of discussion that we can interact with them on to where then when they come to interact with you, they can also work with that on a much stronger basis. Quick question that came in through the chat. I'll pause to switch over to that. And that's, is it still on the table for the state going onto a universal SIS system? And I would say it's really a board decision of where we go with that. But the feedback that I've heard the board say when we were at that SIS meeting was that as a state, we want to do what's best for our students, best for the state, and for everyone involved. If that ends up being a single SIS, then it's still on the table, but that we're not locked into that direction. There's no hard decisions that have been made. So for now, just keep listening, and especially with new board members and being in the legislative session now, there could be feedback that progresses that conversation. Next question was, so have we spoken with the SIS vendors about the S5 record and other new changes? And that's going to be mostly a no. That's expected to come out on our first meeting that we would like to get set up for follow-up with this feedback, is to come to them with not just this CMP work, but with all of the work that we have planned throughout the rest of the school year, where they can again have time for preparing that, getting that built out, hopefully working at the same time in their development as we're working with our development, to where we can then release things out on a closer to equal basis, instead of a handoff where we develop it all, then we hand it off to the SIS and they, then spend their multiple months to go out and develop it. And then we're already at the end of the school year. If we're going to be able to pull things off like mid-year updates, like the CMP or other things, I think that this is the format that we've discussed would really be helpful and able to allow us to do that. So I'll keep moving on. Some of the other key takeaways were that they had a desire to build more real-time validation. This sadly isn't something that I can help with directly at this point. This is something that's going to be coming more through USIMS, to be able to get that real-time validation. And what that means is that as you enter in a student, if there's a validation error that's going to come through, you don't necessarily have to wait until the next day or overnight to be able to see that this will trigger a validation error. Because with the direction that USIMS is working on, with the new EdFi format, that would be available. That would be something that could be done. And that's where everyone's got their focus for trying to bring new innovation that's going to take a lot of development work to do. I think that we had a good portion of the SISs that were able to actually attend in person. And I think that we had the rest that were able to attend online. So I do believe that we did get a full coverage spread. All right, and then we've got some other feedback was for a better flow of training on changes, new features. Again, we've got a great use case example right before this. And being able to get that brought to, again, first to the SIS vendors, to the LEA admins, and then making sure that that information also falls through all the way to staff. And the ability for this conversation to start in this direction should also include the SIS vendors being able to share with the LEA admins, here's where it's going to be in the SIS. Here's what we have planned for this. By us engaging with them first, that's kind of our hope, is that when we then release out this information in one of these monthly meetings, hopefully we've already had a chance to be able to talk to them, share that information, and they can talk to you on a more educated level about it with potentially some plans or some details to be able to get back to you. All right. And then another feedback that we had was for better APIs to be able to get to all of the student data. And with this, we do already have a few APIs out there. And there are definitely going to be new APIs coming through USIMS. So part of this we're also going to be trying to communicate is better understanding of what's in place, what can be used right now, make sure it's being utilized while we're getting things migrated over into the new systems APIs. So that should also hopefully meet that need there. Then also better clarity as far as what is associated with funding. Because as everyone knows, when there's funding being held back from an error, from a problem, things tend to happen a lot faster. So being a little bit more clear on that should also help with helping them prioritize, helping you prioritize. So that's some feedback that we're going to take a look at how we can best work with that to be able to help make that clear. Go ahead to the next slide. All right, so next steps for USB-E. We have existing meetings with our SIS vendors through USIMS initiatives, and will be initially requesting some time to discuss newly passed legislature that would require SIS development, new fields, as we had talked about, things which are in progress already, such as like the CMP for new feature work, and not restricting it just to those, but also looking again for any workflow opportunities or any technical constraints to where we can have that sort of developer to developer possibility to find out if there's any complications with things or timeframes or just workflows. We're hoping to be able to get a little bit technical with some of these meetings to be able to just make things flow smoother for everybody involved and help that communication from the SIS to the LEA be a little bit more pre-prepared for you. All right, go to the next slide. So let us know what you think. We wanted to make sure that you are aware of this, that we are engaging them, wanting to try to build a better relationship between us and them to be able to help support you, and just make sure that things happen in a timely and efficient manner. You can feel free to reach out to myself and Aaron Bruff about any of your feedback for this or any suggestions. Anything that you think would be beneficial, we're happy to hear. I'm not seeing anything not addressed into the chat. So I think that I'll go ahead and continue on with address validation. Go ahead to the next slide. So I'm sure if you've been at any of these meetings in the last 6+ months, you've heard me talk about this a bunch of times. So this is definitely going to be a recap and a needed recap because we are nearly releasing out the switch from the address validations going from warnings into fatals. So the district of residence errors will be going live as a non-loading fatal error on February 3rd. So that gives you around 2 weeks to try to get things resolved out. We've got invalid address is the first error, and this validation triggers when the student's address cannot be validated and therefore used to check the district of residence field. The second that we have is the invalid district of residence, which is this validation triggers when the student's address is not within the boundaries of the district of residence reported. Go ahead to the next slide. So some examples of current address failures. We've got students that have PO box numbers, highway numbers, exit numbers, mile marker numbers, other bus directions, and then newly built or rural addresses that are not registered with the Utah Geospatial Resource Center, which I've provided the link for there as well. And just to be clear that they are not as up to date as the Postal Service. So there is still a gap in our ability to check things at the efficiency that the Postal Service can offer. So we will be working for, trying to enhance any opportunities to do better and have better address validation over time. But this is the best that we're able to apply and release out at this point in time. As of 1/22, so yesterday, there were still 2,793 students across 72 districts that have the invalid address, currently warnings, but will become fatals. The count on that today. I think that dropped by around like 100. So I know that you guys are out there working on these, and we are seeing progress. But just to make sure that everybody is giving this the utmost attention and aware of these numbers. The invalid district of residence errors, there's only 64 of those and across 17 districts. Go to the next slide. So now that I've kind of scared you with these numbers, I want to let you know what the effect is. So what these errors are going to cause. If you get the address validation error and your student is already in Utrex, they will no longer receive updates. So that means that if there's something that they needed immediately that they weren't already in, this would immediately prevent them from receiving any new services from the state, such as assessments or other programs like the child nutrition program. They will not be able to meet the requirements for funding. So funding doesn't happen all the time throughout the year. So there is a bit of time there before that one will come back and start to become a big problem. But we're not saying that you should hold off on this because we understand, again, that any changes are typically needed as fast as possible in the system and need to be taken very seriously. The student hasn't been entered into Utrex this year, then it's going to be all the above, but it's also going to be that they're not loaded into other USB applications for reporting for the year. So that will mean that they don't get into Utrex, and Utrex will not be able to share them out to other applications until they've been able to get past this. I'm not seeing anything in the chat yet, but if anybody does have any concerns or questions, if any of this is seeming like something you need to talk about, definitely let us know. We want to help you through this and help get these resolved and be as clear and transparent as possible with what to expect.
Hey, Cliff, there's one question.
Okay.
It says, how are new addresses registered with the UTC GRC?
I can't say 100%. I can talk to you about, well, looks like I've already got a developer here jumping in to help me out. So the addresses come from the county surveyor. So some counties don't get surveyed all that often, and they don't get updated all that often. So coming from being a state department, those state funds to pay for the surveyors, that's kind of the slowdown on some of those being as up to date as something like the Postal Service. So they can definitely speak to their county about trying to get that surveyed and get that pushed out for updates. But as USPE, we don't have any control over that. And I don't believe that they have a lot of control over it either. I think it is very much like a county controlled thing. Right, so there's another note in here about graduation rate for 5 years. So we can swing back to this one. This looks like it's a separate topic. All right, so go ahead to our next slide. The three geospatial fields on the specification are listed as follows. So you can go back to the new specification and see this verbatim for what's shown here. I'll try to just give an overview on this and not go through every detail of it, but we have the GPS latitude and longitude fields. albeit that these are saying optional. If the regular address field doesn't work and you're getting validation errors, that's when these would be needed. Other than the GPS, we've got the geocode. So the big benefit that we have from the geocode is that you can go right to a browser screen and you can zoom in on a map and you can just keep dialing in with the family, with the student to show where the address is, point to their house, and then you can just record in that geocode. And that's an ability that you don't easily get with something like GPS, where you need to have a device that has service or the ability to actually pinpoint it while you're there. The order in which we review these, so this is getting into the technical, is listed out here. So we're saying that first thing we're doing is we're looking at the GPS, and then we're checking that against, then we're checking for the geocode. And then we're checking the GPS from the student physical address, line 1. So we still have this in place in case your SIS doesn't have those fields available for you. We'll still spot check this and see if that data is there and available, just to make sure that we're taking every opportunity for any student addresses to be able to get everything resolved. And then, we check again that location database for the geocode against a physical address. And then finally, if those don't work, then we're just coming back to that it has to be right in the physical address. And that's our priority order that we're looking through that. Obviously, if any of those fields are blank, it does just skip past them and goes to the next one available. All right, let's go to the next slide. So again, this is a little bit, again, on the technical side for the 3 geospatial fields, but just to where you feel that you've got the information that you need to be able to address this. Some extra details here. We've got the details about the SIF with this being implemented out. And then we've got the details that I kind of just went through about sort of the order of which way we're going through this, but just written out a little bit more detailed. And hopefully this helps with anybody who's having a hard time just working through the previous priority orders. So if you do have any questions on those or not knowing why something isn't being accepted when you believe you're sending it correctly, refer back to that sort of priority order. And if it doesn't work and it seems like there's something not right, then we'd want you to reach out to us and we'll give you help. Go ahead to the next slide, which jumps right into how to resolve those address validation failures. If the address just had a problem with how it was entered, something that you can see somebody messed up on the spelling or the placement of how the address was entered in and it was just a typo, then that would be your first step, is to try to resolve any potential typos, any entry value issues. And if there weren't any of those, then you would need to go with our alternative method of using the GPS or the geocode to be able to get that resolved. And as I'd mentioned, please reach out to us so we can try to help you out with any instances where things aren't working, or if your geocode isn't working as expected. And also, as I'd mentioned before, there's previous meetings, and these are out on YouTube and available. So if you need any reminder refreshes of what we've talked about in the past or how to work on these, that's still a resource for you as well too. but we're happy to help you with any support tickets you can put in to be able to walk through any use cases that you have. Go to the next slide. All right, so we can pause for just a second if there's anybody that wants to jump in with anything before we move on. Any concerns? Questions? All right, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Cliff. My name is Katrina Brinkley. I'm the Chief Product Owner and Program Manager for USIMS, which is the Utah Schools Information Management Structure. And I hope that's not a new word to all of you, but if it is, feel free to reach out and ask me questions. Next slide, please. We're just going to give you a little bit of an update that was derived from our recent USIMS Functional Advisory Board meeting on January, I believe it was January 9th. We can go to the next slide. And the next slide again. This is our USIMS roadmap that is available to all of you at any time. This gives you an outline of what we are working on, what's currently being worked on, and the things that we'll be talking about coming up. There is a link on this slide. So once you're provided the access, there's that link there. Please feel free to click it, enroll, get logged into Lucid. You're welcome to interact with this roadmap and ask questions about it at any time. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn the time over to our product owner for the student domain for a few minutes, Mark Waddups. Mark.
Okay, thank you, Katrina. I'm, as Katrina mentioned, I'm Mark Waddups, the product owner for the student domain. And I'm just going to take you through real quickly the work that we're doing on the Student Achievement Backpack. I'll try and go fairly quickly given our agenda. But please feel free to use the chat to ask any questions there. Next slide, please. Okay, this is, some of you have probably seen this before. This is just an overview of what the Student Achievement Backpack is and how the data flows. So the real, just in summary, there's really two scenarios for this. When Johnny or Sarah moves from one LEA to another, they're oftentimes moving from one SIS system to another. And when they do that, that information doesn't always follow them. Sometimes it can show up as late as 3 months later when the cumulative file or other data is requested from another LEA. So part of the purpose of the Student Achievement Backpack is to do that. The second is to the second scenario there is when assessment data is available. Today, you have to go out to multiple assessment vendor portals to get that information. And while that'll still be available, we'll also have a record of those assessment scores that will follow the student as they go from one LEA to another. So as you can see there in the bottom right, you have that complete learner profile, not just for LEAs to be able to better inform them on how to help a student transition into a new LEA or to match them up with specific programs, but also for the student and the parent, because that's a complete record that follows with them, so that when they get to 12th grade or getting ready to graduate, they're not going back and looking at transcripts and saying, hey, where's all my 9th grade score or information that when I was in Alpine School District and now I'm in Nebo. So that's a quick overview. It's really us facilitating that transfer and then making sure that that data follows the student. Next slide, please. So in this, using that concept of a backpack, these are just folders within that backpack or learner profiles. This is, based off of the legislation 53E-3-511. There's a link in the previous slide to that if you want to go look at it. But it basically authorizes us to capture this information, or I should say to ensure that this follows with the student as part of their student backpack. Next slide, please. So this slide, we can skip this slide and the next one. This just goes through the value that the student backpack provides. It looks like it's not rendering very well there. We'll have to fix that. And then when it comes to progress that we made on that backpack information, we now have student attendance, summary attendance, and an endpoint available for our SIS vendors to be able to use. They can't quite access it yet, and I'll get to that here in just a moment, but that is ready at least with summative data. There is some work that we'll need to do to get a lot of the, as this audience well knows, you capture at the LEA level section attendance. And in talking to each of the LEAs in our student focused working group as well, you capture that information. It's just not been required to be shared with the state. So we'll be working this next quarter to get to go through the right channels and approvals to make sure we get that. And Cliff and I will be having some discussions to ensure that both systems can benefit from that in the short term. Next slide, please.
Hey, Mark, there's a question in the chat about
Oh,
it says, how
thank you.
far back will student records be updated?
Ooh, excellent. We're focused right now so that we can deliver the value. We're focusing on the past year, but the intention is that we will have historical information as much as is provided by the LEA. So as you're submitting data all the time for reporting purposes, we're capturing that data. So depending on the data set, if it's attendance, then as far back as we have data for that particular student, that will follow. I don't know if that answers your question well, but behavior, Misty asked the question, remind me, will behavior data be communicated? At this time, no. It's very specific. The student backpack legislation is very specific about what data will move with the student. So at this point, if I understand your question correctly on what you mean by behavior data, that will not be associated with the student backpack. That could change, and the intent with the student backpack is that we're building this in a way that it's flexible enough that we could add additional data sets. You'll see that eventually we're going to be adding some special education data to the student backpack. That includes the SCRAM data, eligibility reports, and eventually the full IEP, so that that data moves with the student based off of legislation. Any other questions? Thanks, Katrina. I missed that. Yeah, you bet, Misty. Okay. Student demographic information. So there'll be select student demographic information that will move with the student. The intent is not to be comprehensive, but to be very specific about what data moves with that student. For instance, English learner information, military child status, because that can have implications for programs that student may be needing, homelessness status, that helps inform decisions, from a holistic student perspective. That's just some examples of what we're doing there, but the intent is that we will be very specific based on feedback we get from our focus working group, which includes both our USB subject matter experts, but almost more importantly, our LEAs, to be able to inform the reasons behind why and how this data would be used and the value that it would provide. Okay, next slide, please. This is Rise in Utah Aspire Plus. So those scores are being made available Again, the legislation's pretty specific about what's needed, but we've also worked with our focus working group to be able to provide that. If there are those of you, I'll just pause here and say, if there's anyone who would like to attend those, we meet every other week on Mondays at 3 o'clock. We would love to have you come and participate, especially now that we're starting to provide API endpoints and ways for you to get real student data. It will be really important for us to get feedback directly from the LEAs on how this data is being used and if there's any hiccups that you're having with that. And just future plans wise, we're working on ACT and Acadience, and we'll be looking to add growth scores as well. Next slide. This covers some tech enhancements. I think we can skip this in interest of time, if that's okay. This just kind of shows our progress and what we're making. I've covered much of this. You can see kind of what's coming up. Next slide. And I think that does it for us. I'll just reference back to Cliff had mentioned that the meeting with our SIS vendors back in December. We also, in preparation for that meeting, we also met with each of the SIS vendors. I think Katrina mentioned that there was one that wasn't in attendance. That would have been Compass. And we've reached out repeatedly to them, haven't got any responses back, but we did meet with the other 7 SIS vendors in the state just to give them an update on exactly what I just presented, what the student backpack is, that we are making available an Ed5 based or Ed5 formatted, if you will, standard API so that they can come and get that information. And so we wanted to make sure that they were aware of that we could give them the latest information and help them see that, hey, this is really moving forward and it's time for us to have more specific conversations as we're providing this documentation for integration. Some of our SIS vendors are like Skyward and PowerSchool are certified with Ed5, and the hope there is that that will lessen or the lift, so to speak, to integrating. But we have some others that you know that aren't necessarily certified there, and so that might require a little bit more work on their end. We're going through our last round of documentation editing, and you should be seeing that come to your LEAs within the next week, so that you can go through that for your LEA SIS support staff can go through that and start asking any questions, as well as access some test data that we can do. We're also working on a tokens and secret management application, which would allow the LEAs to come in and get a secret, which essentially is the credentials that allow them to say, hey, I am who I say I am, and I need to get access to this student's backpack information. It will allow that, which will provide additional level of security and allow them to kind of do self-service when it comes to getting that information. So that's a lot, but in the interest of time, wanted to say that. Please reach out to me. It's Mark Waddups. You can reach out to me and or to Katrina, and I'd be happy to answer any specific questions that you have after this as well. Okay, now I can turn the time over back to Katrina.
Thanks, Mark. I wanted to give this group just really general overviews of our other 2 domains and USIMs that may not as directly impact this group, but I wanted you to be aware of because it is on the outskirts of the work that you are doing. So the finance domain is also in progress. And if we could move to the next slide. Thank you. The finance domain has been hard at work at creating accounts and combinations for the USBE business users. That's going to allow all of our financial analysts to be able to add accounts and local accounts and indirect costs and those kinds of things into USIMS. And this will allow all of your LEA financial users to log in and look at the account codes that are available and search for those combinations. Next slide, please. As well as vendor management within USIMS. So when you're required to update information or send USB information about your vendors or about your contracts, that information can be located within USIMS. We already have an EdFi API set up, and our finance domain has been working with each of your financial systems vendors to ensure that they are capable of connecting to this API and accessing it and sending and receiving information. We have at least a couple who are already verified as in the environment and sending and receiving information. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, they've got, there it is, Harris and QCC is working with one of the last groups to get not installed, enabled within USIMS to get access, my apologies. And then they will be working on indirect costs. That was a conversation in their finance focus working group just yesterday. And looking forward to doing carry forward calculations once the USIMS has actual LEA data. And next slide, please. Our educator domain has been hard at work providing educator licensure, UPAC information, as well as they're beginning to work on assignments within USIMS. Next slide, please. And one more, please. Thank you. You can see here, just on this bottom portion, are some sections that are available within USIMS for educator licensure. Some of these are filtered so that only those with feature access can see them, like criminal background review, UPAC. And the educator prep program is limited to those who have access at our universities and are completing the educator prep program. And next slide, please. They're currently working on production enhancements for a CBR BCI connection that allows us to update background check information for all of our educators within the state with BCI's automated programming interface or API. It allows us to get that information back and forth immediately. They're also working on the educator prep program finalization. We've released to a limited number of universities, and we'll be working on the final, I believe it's 3 universities. No, it's 3 more universities this month, and then the final 2 universities in April. And then we are addressing any issues as they come through. And they are right now working on assignments within the educator domain, which means educators are receiving assignments within their LEAs, and we're working on kind of architecting that and what it looks like within USIMS. If you'd like to join us for those conversations, we would be more than happy to have your attendance at our focus working groups. And yeah, next slide, please. You can see this is just kind of a list of all of the work that was done for the educator domain in the last quarter. Next slide, please. And this is a kind of a sneak peek of what the assignments are going to look like and how you can view the assignments within your LEA. Next slide, please. And a drilled down example of an educator and their assignments. Next slide. With more information about renewal task checklists. So if you're going into renew, which it is renewal season this year, for this month, woo, you'll see this when you go into renew your licensure. Next slide, please. And next, if you'd like me to go over any of these, feel free to jump up, but we just wanted to give you a really high overview of what's going on within these domains and the things that we are working on improving. Next slide, please. And our upcoming events, we have Every Tuesday is our educator focus working group or sprint review. Every other Monday, as Mark mentioned, is our student focus working group and sprint review. Every other Wednesday from last week is yesterday is finance focus working group. And then we have a functional advisory board meeting where you can receive all of these updates and more from each of the domains, each of the teams on April 9th, 2025 at 4 p.m. We try to keep that to an hour to ensure that everybody's able to get in and get the information that they need and get off to the work that they're doing. We also do a USIMS onsite on a every 6 months basis. That onsite is an opportunity for our developers to go out and meet in person with those of you at the LEAs who are really doing the work. We want to understand what your struggles are. We want to understand the problems that we can solve and the best ways in which we can solve them. And that means talking to all of you and getting feedback from all of you. So our goal at these on-sites is to spend that time with our LEAs. If your LEA would like to have a conversation with us during that on-site time, or even outside of that on-site time, we're happy to do Teams and Zoom meetings. We would love to hear from you. Please feel free to reach out to myself or to Mark. And I believe that is all of our slides for USIMS.
Okay, hello. I just getting my screen set up here so I can see chats as or questions as we go. Okay, so if you want to go to the next slide for me. Okay, so I am here this month to talk about changes that are happening this year in the determinations process. I come to this meeting several times a year talking about data that we have to review and update and pay attention to because it impacts results-driven accountability. So that is what's changing. So the new determination process is going to be referred to as annual performance determinations, APD, instead of results-driven accountability. And it's not just a change in names. We also have a changes to some of the measures that are included in it. And just some background about determinations. So the Office of Special Education Programs is required to make determinations for states on how states are doing in implementing the requirements of IDEA. And then in turn, states have to make determinations for LEAs on how LEAs are doing with implementing requirements of IDEA. And we have certain measures that we have to include in our determinations. And then otherwise, there's some flexibility. It's up to us on how we want to design our determination process. Next slide, please. So in the past, with results-driven accountability, LEAs were given a risk score, and that the RDA, for the most part, the scoring was based off of the indicator data that we submit annually to the Office of Special Education Programs. And when you get a copy of this presentation, you can follow that link to see more information about the indicators. Plus, there are a few other things included in results-driven accountability, non-compliance, correction of non-compliance, meeting deadlines on time, things like that. And then the risk scores were used to assign LEAs to one of the 4 OSEP determination tiers, and that results in do you need monitoring and various activities that your special department would have to do throughout the year. So the new annual performance determination. So we're not required to use every single indicator in determinations. And so we're no longer gonna use all of them. We are using the ones that we're required to use to meet the minimum requirements for the OSEP determinations. And also including some measures that we feel and got feedback from focus groups, stakeholders that help us focus on measures that are more actionable. And then we also eliminated some indicators that are less causal for improving outcomes for students with disabilities. Next slide, please. Okay, so what does this mean for you? So if you're in February, your LEA is going to get an annual performance determination letter that details each measure and the data used in the score for that measure. And frequently, special ed directors like to dig into that data to verify that it's correct, to if they have to do a performance improvement plan based on the information in that measure, then they really do have a strong incentive to dig into the measure and find out what's going on to try to determine root cause, and also come up with action plans for how to improve it. And so they may come to you for help with accessing the data behind the measures, behind the outcomes, and digging into it. And so it's important for you to be aware, and so that when they come to you with this letter with new measures, you're prepared to help them dig into it. So when we send out the PowerPoint and the recording from this meeting, there's going to be an attachment included in the email titled Annual LEA Determinations 2025, and that will list all of the new measures. But more importantly, in the annual performance determination letters that come out in February, there will be more details about the measure and the data that's included. And so that'll help you get started with helping them dig into their data, but always feel free to reach out to me if you need more information on the calculations. So probably the included measures that are going to be the biggest impact as far as student data that gets submitted through UTREX, or student data that you're probably used to looking at with assessments, our assessment, dropout, and graduation measures. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the assessment measures, so the data we submit to OSEP, indicator 3 is the assessment measures. There's 4 of them, 3A, B, C, and D. And so we're no longer strictly using indicator measures. We are still going to use 3B and 3C. So those are your proficiency in language arts and math assessments. 3B is regular assessments, 3C is alternate assessments. But those indicators only look at grades 4, grade 8, and then high school, which is grade 9 and 10 combined. So we'll still use those. And just remember, if you're digging into assessment data and results in this, and you're saying this doesn't match our state accountability, that's because the data behind indicator 3 is based on EDFACS requirements. And the EDFACS requirements for us in reporting our assessment results, for participation, their expectation is that all students who are enrolled during the assessment window, with few exceptions, are expected to test. And then for the proficiency results, and any student who was determined to be a participant and they had a valid proficiency level assigned, is going to be included in the proficiency results. We're no longer using 3D at all. 3D measured the gap in proficiency between students with disabilities and all students on regular assessments. We are adding in MGPs. So it's going to look at the median growth percentiles for your LEA among all students with disabilities in language arts and math in all grade levels, 4 through 10. And so this is to help with, we know that we can have students who are consistently testing below grade level or below proficient, despite having growth. So including MGPs as one of the measures is going to acknowledge that situation that some LEAs may still have low proficiency while having high growth. And then using all grades instead of limiting it to 4, 8, and 10, that eliminates some low end size problems that we run into with some of these indicator 3 measures for small LEAs. And then instead of using 3A, which is the participation rate among students with disabilities in grades 4, 8 in high school, we're going to look at participation among all students with disabilities in all grade levels, grades 3 through 10. And so again, that'll be helpful in eliminating low end size problems with some of this for small LEAs. Next slide, please. Okay, and then a new one that we're adding is looking at assessment non-participation reasons. So for math and language arts in all grade levels, using that EdFEX expectation that with few exceptions, every student who's enrolled during the assessment window is expected to test, we look at all the non-participants and we look at the data we have on the reason for non-participation. And we calculate across for the state, what is the average non-participation rate among 4 different categories of non-participation: students who are absent, students who were opted out, students that the reason for non-participation is unknown, and then all the other non-participation reasons get clumped into this other category. And then we calculate the mean and the standard deviation. And for this, the goal is to not exceed the mean by more than 1 standard deviation. So and then the score for this one is based on how many of the 4 categories did your LEA have that exceeded the goal. So in just to give you an idea of how this plays out, looking at our 2024 assessment data across all LEAs, in language arts and in math, both, the majority of LEAs don't have a non-participation rate in any of the categories that's more than 1 standard deviation above the mean. And then just under a fifth have 1 area that's more than 1 standard deviation above the mean, and only 3 or 4 had 2 categories that were more than 1 standard deviation above the mean, and only 1 LEA had 3 categories that were more than 1 standard deviation above the mean. So most of the LEAs are going to do well on this one. And for the LEAs that do have areas of non-participation that are more than 1 standard deviation above the mean, we're hoping that this will move the needle in trying to improve participation rates in those LEAs. Next slide, please. Okay, so for dropout, so the dropout has been indicator 2. We're no longer using that. Indicator 2 is based on a file we submit to EdFACS, which includes students age 14 through 21 who exit special education. And for indicator 2, the numerator is students who drop out, and the denominator is students who exit in a number of different ways that usually only occur in 12th grade. And instead of using indicator 2, we're going to use the event dropout rate, also known as the single year dropout rate, for students with disabilities in grades 7 through 12. So again, the numerator is the same, students who drop out. The denominator is what is changing for this. So for the event dropout rate, the denominator is all students with disabilities who were enrolled in grades 7 through 12 during that school year. And while for indicator 2, like I said, most of the things that were included in the indicator 2 denominator, other than dropouts, are things that happen in 12th grade. And so this one is really frustrating for LEAs that have 7th and above, but don't have grade 12, because they'll have 100% dropout rate if they have even one dropout. They'll have one student in their numerator and one student in their denominator. So that's a pretty frustrating way to do the dropout measure. We go to the next slide, please. So because the numerator for this is the same, and pretty much all the work we do around improving our indicator 2 dropout rate every year is going to be the exact same work we're going to continue to do on improving our event dropout rate. So there's really not going to be any impact on LEAs as far as needing to do additional work. And this measure is going to be easier to calculate, easier to understand. It'll be fairer for LEAs that serve grade 7 and higher, but don't have grade 12. If you're interested in learning more about event dropout rates, there's a report on the USBE website that's been getting published for a long time now, I think over a decade. So you can go back and read those reports. Here's the link, and it also has a section at the end that an appendix that explains the difference between event dropout rates and cohort dropout rates. Next slide, please. And then I have a chart here to show what the statewide event dropout rates have been in 2014 through 2024, because I want to include this because I was very excited this year to see what happened with this. We have closed the gap. The dropout rate in 2024 for students with disabilities compared with all students is pretty much identical. 3.13% for students with disabilities, 3.11% for all students. That is amazing, so exciting. This rate's mostly decreased over the years. If we ignore 2020 and 2021, which were heavily impacted by COVID, it's pretty much been mostly a steady decline over the years. And we're probably near what we can expect it to kind of just kind of even out at probably. And there's a question, how often are the cohort dropout rate report updated? And actually I noticed, Christy, you asked a similar question earlier, and I think David Mackey or Callista would be the one to answer that question for you, and I don't think either of them are here today, so they'll have to get back to you about that. Okay, the graduation. Okay, so graduation. So that one is also changing to no longer use the OSEP indicator, which was indicator 1. Indicator 1 was also based on that same EDFACS file, students with disabilities age 14 through 21 exiting special ed. Indicator 1, the numerator would be students who graduate with a regular high school diploma, and then the denominator would be dropouts plus those other things that mostly happen in grade 12. So instead of using indicator 1, we're going to use the 4-year cohort graduation rate. Oh, it shouldn't say single year dropout rate. I didn't delete that. We're using the 4-year cohort graduation rate. Ignore that part of the parentheses for students with disabilities. And so the numerator includes students who, by the end of their cohort year, complete either a regular diploma or an alternate diploma. And the denominator includes students in their cohort year. Next slide, please. Okay, so because LEA's already put so much work into improving graduation outcomes and ensuring accurate cohort rates, there's really no additional added burden on LEAs by us switching from indicator 1 to cohort graduation rate in our determinations. And now using this cohort rate instead of indicator 1, your hard work is going to be reflected in your determinations on the graduation aspect of it. The cohort graduation rate compared with indicator 1 is easier to calculate, easier to understand, easier to anticipate. It'll be fairer for LEAs that serve grade 7 and higher, but don't have grade 12. And then the indicator 1 doesn't include students who earn the alternate diploma in the numerator, but this one does. So we'll get recognized for getting those students to earn an alternate diploma in your graduation rate here where you don't in the indicator 1. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you have any questions as these letters start coming to your LEA, and if you're asked to help dig into the data, you can reach out to me, and Emily Nordfeld is the other main person that you would want to reach out to about it. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Malia. So I'm here to provide an update on the SOAR report. Next slide, please. So the SOAR report is the Student Outcome Accountability Report, and that's been created for counselors to have access to aggregate student data to assist with decision-making processes. So there's stuff like enrollment counts, students with disability counts, advanced courses, chronically absence rates, proficiency, dropout, grad rates, etc. And so these will be available soon, and this has 3 years of data. So for this year, we'll have 2022, 2023, and 2024. And they should be up on the data gateway within a week or so. And the way that they are accessed is by logging into the data gateway, going to My Tools, and then going to SOAR, which is under counseling. And you can select district or school, and then you select all school reports zip file to download the reports for all schools in your LEA. And please let us know by mid-February if any schools are missing or don't have updated data. Will we send an email when they're ready? I will make a note to send out an email once they're ready. Hopefully they'll be ready by the time we send out the notes and the recording of this meeting, and I'll just like add a little note in there. But if not, we can send an extra email once those are posted. Yeah. Next slide. I think that's it for me. All right, off to Stephanie.
Thank you, Riley. So here are 2 short announcements for archived reports. Next slide, please. The October archived reports for the school year 2024 to 25 are now available on the data gateway. Typically, these archived reports takes months to become available after the finalization date. So please remember to download all UTRAC's reports for that submission as soon as you finalize them for any immediate use. Next slide, please. Similarly, December archived reports are now available on Data Gateway as well. Again, please remember to download them right after you finalize in the future. Next slide, please. I think that'll be all. I'll give it to Melissa.
Hey everybody. I just have a really quick announcement for our last topic of the day, I believe. So I think it was already mentioned earlier in today's meeting, the newest version of our UTREX specifications is ready and complete. It is available on the website. Next slide, please. So this is my only slide. So this slide, if you go into the slides when you receive them, I believe after this meeting, this link on the slide goes to the web page of our website that has the link to the PDF of the UTREX specifications. You can also directly link to the PDF itself. We have actually made it so that link that directly takes you to the PDF should be updated now. So I guess in the past, if you had a link directly to the PDF, it wouldn't update. But as of this update, it should update to the newest version. That was our planned functionality of that. If that doesn't work, definitely reach out and let us know. But hopefully that will make things easier for everybody. But it is a good time just to check your bookmarks if you have this bookmarked, whether that's the direct link to the PDF or to the website page, whichever you prefer. Just make sure you have your bookmarks updated. And yeah, if those of you familiar with the document, it's pretty standard. At the beginning, you'll see a list of the most recent changes, and most of those were already covered today on this call. The largest change really is the CNP, that S5 record and those new fields. So you can see all the details about that in there. And yeah, next slide, please. And that's pretty much it for me. I can answer questions about, when the spec gets updated and the formatting of it. But if you have other questions, you can probably just reach out to the folks who have spoken to those topics on this call. And yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. If there's any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. Otherwise, we will be sending out the recording and notes next week, so keep an eye out for that. And just a reminder about those address validations turning fatal on the 3rd.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yes, go for it.
Just on the topic of that, the UTREX specification document and the links being updated. The link, if you go into the data gateway and go to the question mark, the help area, there's a link there that is still pointing to the 2019-2020 version of the document. Can we get that link either updated or just removed because it's not useful?
Yeah, Cliff, are you still on here?
I am. I'll take a look for that and get that removed. Is it possible that you have that in your bookmarks and you can shoot that to me in an email? And I'll make sure that I directly target that.
Yeah, it's just in the help section of the data gateway. There's a link that says data specification, and it's not the current one. So
Gotcha. Okay.
just point
So-
that to the current one or remove it altogether from the help section.
Will do.
So, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And Jennifer, would you be able to shoot me an email so that I can help figure out, because it's kind of hard for us to look at resolving this without having the specifics.
This new spec file has is what will go into effect February 3rd with the address warnings.
The specs files are as of January. I do believe that the way that the specs are like released is that things that will become fatal will often be noted as this will be fatal. And I'm trying to look at the last version. If they were
That's okay. That's a good answer. I'm happy with that answer. I'm sure it includes that verbiage.
It does.
Yeah, they're definitely fatal for this version.
Okay, thanks.
Alrighty, thanks everyone. See you all in the next meeting, not next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.